Shall we start? Good evening, everyone. It's my tremendous pleasure to be your host tonight. My name is Reza Zia-Ebrahimi. I'm a historian of nationalism and race with an interest in the Middle East here at King's College. And I'm also the director of the King's Race Research Network, or the KRRN. I would like to, before proceeding, thank many of my colleagues in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities who really worked over hours to make it possible to hold this event at the very last minute. We are here tonight as members of King's College London, students and staff, united by a fundamental commitment, which is our opposition to the dispossession, the oppression, and the extermination of the Palestinian people. We believe that our stance is the bare minimum, the most basic requirement of our shared humanity. Yet, we live in societies where an entire ecosystem enables and sustains the genocide of Palestinians. As the Israeli Defense Forces carpet bomb Gaza, destroying its places of worship, its residences, its schools, and its hospitals, targeting journalists, targeting aid workers, starving the population, and engaging in systematic torture and sexual violence, what are our institutions doing? The British government relentlessly defends Israel's so-called right to defend itself, which is a euphemism for unrestrained colonial violence and genocide. The Royal Air Force is suspected of sharing intelligence with those executing them. British industry continues to supply arms to those committing these atrocities. Mainstream media, particularly the BBC, abandon all editorial standards to provide Israel with the political cover it needs to carry out genocide in broad daylight. On our streets, the police and the authorities conduct a witch hunt against pro-Palestine protesters, branding us as hate marchers, as anti-Semites and extremists. Those who harass and intimidate us, sometimes physically, are treated as victims of anti-Semitism. Never mind that there are more Jews in our ranks than in theirs. And then there are universities, including this one. Academia can be complicit in genocide in multiple ways, through silence, through repression, and active collaboration. And we are honored to be able to explore these critical issues with Francesca Albanese tonight, who joins us as an international lawyer, as the UN Special Rapporteur, and above all, as a fellow human being and as an ally. But before we welcome her to the stage, a few words of introduction by my colleague Lucia Pradella, who is the chair of our union's branch and a reader in international political economy, and also a few words by Karam Weigert, one of our most committed students.
Hi everyone, and thanks Reza for inviting me to speak on behalf of the King's College London UCU branch. It's a great honor to be here tonight with Francesca Albanese, who's a tireless and courageous advocate for Palestinian rights. So thanks so much for being here, Francesca. Can we have an applause? Good, because the room is slightly big. I think we had to move, so it can feel a bit empty, but we will make it feel really full, right? Okay. So as the chair of the branch, I'd like to say a few words about our role as workers in times of genocide. Since October 2023, some unions worldwide have heeded the call by Palestinian trade unions to take direct action, from Spain to Greece, from Italy to the United States. And they have shown that when workers mobilize, they have the power to disrupt the supply chain of genocide. And Yemen's Houthis have also shown us what's possible in this respect. Here in the UK, we have built one of the biggest mass movements in solidarity with Palestine. We've shifted the Trades Union Congress, we have passed motions for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and we pushed the TUC to endorse the workplace days of action. But this is not enough to stop a genocide that is made in the USA, made in the UK, and made in the EU, and is also supported by global powers. A genocide that is aimed at uprooting Palestinian resistance and at imposing a final solution on the Palestinian people. Western powers are behind this project, but so are Russia and China. They all rely on Israel as a stronghold of imperialist interests. And while they call on us to support their wars, whether in Ukraine or elsewhere, they also crack down on dissent at home. We've seen it in Germany, we've seen it in France, in Italy, and now we are seeing it in the United States. Just last week, federal agents seized Mahmoud Khalil from his home in New York. Trump called it the first of many arrests targeting pro-Palestinian voices. Khalil's case is a test for the future of liberal democracies. We have read it even in the Financial Times. And it's also a test for the future of freedom of speech. It's a test for Trump, and it's also a test for ourselves as well. And this is not just a far-right problem or a US problem. In some German states, recognizing Israel's rights to exist is now a condition for citizenship. And here in the UK, the stakes are just as high. We've seen it again and again over the last 17 months. Just the other day, I was reading the news and I realized that the group taking credit for Khalil's arrest in the US is better USA or better worldwide. Yeah, totally. The same group that has been leading a campaign of harassment of pro-Palestinian staff and students here at King's College London, and unfortunately has also targeted Francesca's talk tomorrow at UCL. And the campaign of harassment that we have faced here at King's College, there are some leaflets circulating in the room, has included illegal recordings of seminar discussions, doxing, smears, physical violence, and even death threats. And King's management has been as complicit and unsupportive as many other institutions, and it has failed to safeguard the staff and students and to defend academic freedom. And that's why, as a branch, we have declared a trade dispute with King's College. We are demanding the immediate safeguarding measures and an independent investigation into the institutional racism that determines if and when management decides to implement its own policies and discipline people at King's. And if they refuse to act, we will ballot for industrial action. Some say that this is too much, that we are too obsessed with Palestine, that we are diverting resources from more important issues. I want to ask these people, do you understand what the stakes are? Do you realize that we have reached the stage in which you can't keep quoting that they came for the communist poem, because basically there is literally no one else in front of you. They're coming for Mahmoud, they're coming for our colleague Rana, and they're coming for us, for all of us. And it is our turn to resist. It has always been our turn to resist. Never like today can we understand what Ghassan Kanafani meant when he said that Palestine is the cause of all exploited and oppressed masses in our era. Israel is at the heart of the imperialist system that exploits all of us, and Palestine is at the heart of our resistance. Recognizing this is key for organizing in our workplaces. Otherwise, our vision of class is just another form of identity politics, just a bit pale and stale. The violence that we are experiencing today is just a small fraction of what imperialist Zionist is inflicting on Palestinians. And what is required of us today is just a small fraction of what Palestinians are doing to liberate all of us. As workers, we have the power. We have the power of our labor, and it's time to use it. It's time for unions in the UK and all over the world to do the right thing and call strike action for a free Palestine and for our own freedom. This is how we stop the fascists. This is how we build a world free of exploitation and colonialism. So, free Palestine, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Reza, for letting me speak, and thank you, Francesca, for being here. Living with an empire and reaping the benefit of imperialist plunder, constantly being inundated with the images of atrocity that is rationalized and revered, begs us to ask the question of futility. Because nihilism easily festers after nearly half a century of institutions trading faces, but not changing voices, and most importantly, not changing pockets. Even in the backdrop of an 80-year protracted genocide central to the logic of settler colonial dispossession, we must be reminded of the words of a Ghazan artist, Arij Qaoud. المقاومة أعماق إشكال الحب, or resistance is the deepest form of love. Because the fight to return to one's home, one's land, one's life, is underwritten by a love for liberation and community that confirms that indigeneity isn't a status that's ascribed by this book or that, but is a relation born in confrontation with colonialism. Resistance is the reason why we're all here today. We all know that standing idly by, even from thousands of miles away, allows for oppression abroad to quickly translate to oppression at home. The militarization of the police and its usage against protesters, students, and academics depends on the genocides in Palestine, the Congo, and Sudan. In an attempt to silence students and academics, this university has brushed off the question of Palestine as a hot-button issue entrenched in campus politics, in untouchable ideological war that sometimes gets waged out on the entrance of the Strand building. But fighting for the end of institutional complicity and genocide is not a political game where we hope to make the university fit into our idealized conception of the world. It's, for many of us, our lives and our people. It's ending the affront to our existence. The two bombs that were dropped on the Mer Elias neighborhood in Beirut, where my family lived, were JDAM Blue 109 bunker-busting bombs that were fitted with Boeing-made tracking technologies, a company which King's partnerships over the past couple of years has proven quite lucrative. The software used to guide the drones, the artificial intelligence used to actually target the individuals, were made by Palantir and relied on chips used by ANSYS and NVIDIA, who KCL invests a combined total of about £5.6 million in. So for the intents and purposes of this university, the destruction of my country has been quite a profitable endeavor. Every life, every innocent civilian, every child is a return on investment. Couching genocide apologia in the terms of values-based impartiality, like this university has done, implies that there's an elusive nuance to apartheid that not even a university degree can clarify. But apartheid and the disposability of our lives is self-evident when we're separated by our mothers at an Israeli checkpoint, when we're forced to stare down the gun of an IDF soldier who barks at us as if we're animals, or when we're forced to duck for cover as Israeli bombs carpet our cities. Apartheid is a lived experience that we face every day. In Beirut, you don't need to know how old a building is by checking the public records. You can count the number of bullet holes and how deep they are, which marks which period of occupation aggression they were left at. Recognizing the humanity of the Palestinian people has unfortunately become a matter of resistance. It opens up one to threats of deportation, doxing, intimidation, and racial harassment. Therefore, the question of divestment is inseparable from the question of justice and liberation itself. Insofar as this university maintains its financial linkages to Israel, breeding a culture of complicity, it allows occupation soldiers abroad to act without impunity and allows a minority of students here to intimidate the marginalized who stand in solidarity with the oppressed. Ultimately, we must remember that ceasefire is no more than a word used to restore consumer confidence. It means nothing to the occupation soldiers who have butchered 186,000 people in Gaza since October of 2023. This summer, I will return home to a land that has been maimed and occupied, but to a people who are resilient and incapable of surrender. So I'll end here with words from our fallen comrades at the Popular Front for the Liberation of the Occupied Arab Gulf, whose fight against occupation by British forces in the 60s and 70s have been very quickly forgotten in history. Fadah al-istamar la yakfi, yajib kahra, which means exposing imperialism is not enough. We must conquer it, and that requires all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Karam, and thank you, Lucia, for setting the stage. And now to introduce Francesca Albanese, I invite to the stage a dear colleague who teaches Middle Eastern history alongside myself. She is from Gaza, and she joined King's College in September 2023. And what she has endured since then is beyond words. She's a scholar that I deeply respect and admire, someone whose integrity and courage are unparalleled. She has faced cowardly Zionist harassment with dignity and just as bravely endured King's College London's failure to protect her. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause for Dr. Rana Baker.
Thank you, everyone, and I want to especially thank Reza for this very lovely introduction and for organizing this wonderful event. I want to thank Francesca for joining us tonight, and Reza actually tasked me with giving a brief introduction to Francesca, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm quite honored to have this task of introducing Francesca Albanese, international lawyer, and the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Palestinian Territories, although as we know, all of Palestine is occupied. Now, over the past 16 or 17 months, we've all watched Francesca as she eloquently tore down arguments that sought to legitimize the genocide in Gaza and normalize Zionist settler colonialism in Palestine. It was not just the eloquence that captivated all of us, but also the moral clarity and fearlessness with which Francesca faced apathy and outright support for genocide. So I want to use the next 3 or 4 minutes to speak about moral courage and the question of life and death in Palestine. Here on Euro-American campuses, Palestinians and pro-Palestinian students and scholars are constantly required to justify and defend the morality of their position. We are constantly put in the position of having to prove the moral righteousness of the Palestinian struggle for freedom, and in the position of having to repeatedly testify that the Palestinian struggle is a struggle for life, for liberation from the immoral, genocidal, settler colonial ideology of Zionism. But even when anti-Zionism is recognized as a protected philosophical belief under the Equality Act 2010, universities still cave to pressure and put Palestinians and pro-Palestinian students and academics on trial for possessing the moral courage to call out injustice and call it by its name, Zionism. In the name of Zionism, Tens of thousands of lives have been obliterated in Gaza alone since October 2023, not to mention thousands of lives that have been destroyed in the West Bank and all over Palestine before and after October 7, indeed since the establishment of the settler colonial state of Israel in 1948. It is Zionism that promotes death and that normalizes carnage. Zionism also promotes Islamophobia and is incapable of understanding Islam beyond the racist framework of terrorism. Yet, despite all of this, even a small mention of the enshrined right of the Palestinians to rise up against their colonizers triggers both liberal and conservative panic, and the most extensive investigations by universities, including this one. Zionists and their sleazy, really tacky supporters freely invoke the problematic IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Even the terrorism legislation is invoked to silence us, with universities acquiescing to these putrid attempts to vanquish everything Palestine. But the right of the colonized to resist colonialism is rooted in ethics, in the sound human instinct to reject oppression and the subjugation of fellow humans before it was grounded in law. In my view, only unethical traditions, those rooted in colonial supremacy and the thing called secular reason, demand that the oppressed and the colonized acquiesce and submit. The Palestinians obviously reject this demand. I do too. So must the supporters of the Palestinians. Those who stand for Palestine cannot stand for it only after the Palestinians have been killed. Supporters of the Palestinians must stand with them, stand with us in the struggle, and in struggle and in resistance as well. And this is what I really respect about individuals like Francesca and a lot of our students and colleagues here, including Reza, Lucia, and others. These people have the moral courage to confront those who are morally bankrupt, to tell them off, and to speak to them with a condescension which they very much deserve. Now, public space in liberal democracies is becoming increasingly hostile to those who possess the moral courage to speak up. But from people, again, like our students, colleagues, Francesca, we learn to hold out, we learn to maintain our ground. There has never been a time when moral clarity was more necessary. The injustice is just too blatant and too egregious for cowardly postures of neutrality, even values-based ones, as they like to call them. Neutrality is not only cowardly, but is also deprived of even the appearance of dignity. Today, King's College London is invested in recognizing its colonial past and its past links with slavery. But King's College London should remember that the colonial is not past, the colonial is present. King's College London must have the moral courage to protect those who are targeted on its campus for speaking up for a righteous and just cause, and for people who defend the right of the Palestinians to resist settler colonial oppression. And here I would like to again give a shout out especially to KCL Stands for Justice and to Students for Justice in Palestine for the tireless work that they have been doing over the past over a year now, over 1.5 years since the start of October 7, and even before that. So thank you to the students present today. The students are the very expression of the moral clarity that I was just talking about. I also want to give a shout out to Francesca and to welcome her on our campus today. It's really wonderful to have you. I'm looking forward to what you have to say, and we'll have dinner later. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Rana. Can everybody still hear me? So, Francesca, thank you very much for being with us tonight. I think perhaps it is a good idea to ask you to
1 minute of my time. It's been very, very specific about the time given to provide answers. So still I want to thank the King's Race Research Network, KCL stands for Justice, UCU, and the Students for Justice for Palestine, because without you and without your voice, probably this university could have continued to run with this sense of prestige that frankly today is under scrutiny. So thank you for that, and let's continue with that. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Karam, and thank you, Rana. I was really touched by your word and the power that they carry. And thank you very much, because I have to say that I felt finally welcome in this university before the iftar, of course, when I went to his office. Because sorry, I don't mean to be mean to anyone, but the entrance of this university scared me. This is not normal. This is not normal. And again, I mean, it must be normal in UK universities, but it looks like a US embassy. I mean, but excuse me, I'm not making a fuss about the fact that 2/3 of this room are empty. But this is a sign of privilege, because so many people would have come tonight to talk to us, and the policy of these universities is exclusive rather than inclusive. And this is not normal. This is your university, and should be a place where knowledge is formed to be shared, to transform society, also to challenge society, starting from the very management. And so, but I think we will have a chance to round about the management of this university later. Yeah. Oh, so it's not on record. That's so bad. Say it again.
No worries. Come again. So, yes. The role of a special rapporteur of the United Nations is quite simple. It's to, in my case, is to observe, document, and report on the violations of international law that take place in the land that Israel occupied in 1967, not what it occupied in 1947-49. So what led, in fact, to the creation of the State of Israel inside Palestine. No. I cannot investigate that. I only investigate the violations that Israel continues to commit against the Palestinians in the little that remain of their land, like the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And what the Special Rapporteur is required to do, pro bono, is to, just saying, is, now when it comes to sacrifices, I mean, let's be honest, I'm talking especially, I'm speaking especially to my fellow Europeans in the room. We have privilege and we use it. This is what we do to be fine with our conscience. But a special rapporteur is to write reports, 2 reports a year to the United Nations. That would be it. But since the very beginning of my mandate, I thought that there would be a limit to how much I could achieve by continuing to document and report the violations of international law taking place in the occupied Palestinian territory for 3 reasons. First, because member states know, even the stones in the United Nations know what the Palestinians have endured. And so it's not that member states do not know, it's member states do not act. So one of the things I said is that I need to be more present in the debate at the national level, at the domestic level. So this is what brings me here over and over again. The other thing is that I said there is a limit to my capacity to report on the violations that take place over a given period. And this is a job that is done extraordinarily well by the human rights organizations on the ground, the Palestinian organizations first and foremost, and the Israeli human rights organizations who are there. And so I need to add something more. And this is why I decided to take a step back and describe systemic, widespread, structural violations that take place. And this is why we need to look at the system as an apartheid one. I know that the conflict framework is very convenient to us, Europeans, to explain it, but it's not applicable. It's not applicable unless we stop using conflict as a synonymous of war. There is not a war there. There is a conflict, I understand, but it's not a conflict between two sides, unless we explain that it's a conflict between an occupier and an occupied. So they don't have same means and they don't have same rights. The occupation is unlawful. Even the International Court of Justice saying that. But in my first report, this was the premise of my work. The occupation is unlawful because it violates the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people, which I explained in my report. My first report is the right of the Palestinians to exist as a people. The concept, probably as a student, I learned that self-determination manifests itself as statehood. This is a Western interpretation of self-determination. Self-determination as a right is first and foremost the right of a people to exist as a people, protected as a people, economically, culturally, politically, on a given land. And the Palestinians are seeing the land on which they can exercise their self-determination, either as a state or as individuals, and as protected individuals, shrinking under their feet. So I've tried to expose this broader phenomena. And here comes the genocide. And I have engaged intentionally with the media and with policymakers at the national level, with universities, because I think that now it's about calling out the bluff in a way and exposing the hypocrisy in our part of the world that has been the breeding ground for the impunity that has festered, and it has allowed Israel to run with the multiple violations of international law that it commits.
Thank you, Francesca. I admire how seriously you've taken your job, but I do think you're too humble, because you've been very, very important in consistently holding member states accountable for their attempts to obscure or deny the genocide. You have never given in to their pressures.
Yet.
Pressures from the United States, from the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and all the rest of them. And this has obviously earned you a great deal of enmity and hostility. You are persona non grata in Israel, obviously. Your talk in Germany was recently cancelled, and I'm sure that there's been tremendous pressure on you from US diplomats and lawmakers. Do you want to give us a personal account of these pressures and of these attacks, and what has motivated them and how you have resisted?
Yeah, and I would like this not to be about me, because as I keep on saying, to my fellow special rapporteurs, people in the United Nations, etc., I keep on saying what you see happening to me is an inch of anyone who engages with Palestine has to endure, often in the dark, often silence, often smear. And also, many of these people are first and foremost Palestinians. So I don't want it to make it about me, but I can tell you, and I have to correct my connational. Are you Italian? Yes, okay. No, and because Lucia, you said something, I'm an advocate for Palestinian rights. I'm not. I'm an advocate for the application of international law. So, and it's not, for me, yes, I take very serious my role, because I take very seriously international law, and not because I'm starry-eyed about international law, but because right now the system has turned so hostile, and not just in Palestine, around human rights, and not just in Palestine, but including in our societies, in Italy, in Germany, in the UK, that I do think that this is the last opportunity, and I'm serious, this is the last opportunity to make sure that we don't lose human rights. Let's use them before they are taken away from us, and the risk is there. Sometimes, like my dear friend, the Secretary General of Amnesty International, Agnes Kalamar, says, I struggle to remind myself that we are not in 2024, 2025, because it looks like 1924, 1925, if you see what she means. I do see what it means, and it scares me. Now, it's true that the US administration, some German officials and some French officials, and I mean, the UK have been at least restrained in I've never been publicly attacked, insulted and defamed by the officials in this country so far. And, but they attack me because they are bullies. And of course they don't like me because I don't like bullies. And because it's so clear that what I do is exposing the intimidation, the mafia-style techniques that they use, and I expose the fragility of their trying to use the rule of law system to justify what they do, that of course it becomes embarrassing. But at the same time, I would like to say, these are 5 states which I have accused, one of committing genocide, the other one of being complicit with the crimes of genocide, and another one to, providing economic, political, and military support to a state that is committing genocide. So, of course, I do not expect them to throw confetti at me. It's okay. Let's look at what is happening to the other part of the world that we tend, from our Eurocentric tendency, not to look at. But this is the first time that we really see the Global South taking a stand, putting themselves in the line for Palestine. This is not the era of decolonization, where standing in solidarity with Palestine is okay and cool. It's the post-9/11, where the shock doctrine has sent shockwaves across the world, where the security paradigm has become part of our domestic policy. We look at the other in terms of security. But I would like to tell you what I see, what I've been hearing over and over during the past, especially 16 months, but even before, is the profound racism that travels across the veins of the system. And it's totally exposed now. This is what little Palestine that was almost forgotten has done, has sort of climbed up to the head of the system and thrown them and pushed the mask off. It pulled off the mask. And this is where we are today, and Palestine is being punished, and whomever stands in solidarity with Palestine is punished. So again, what happens to me is not different what happens to all of you. But I would like to encourage you to think of it in terms of racism, because instead of being reactive, I think it's time to really take a stand and being more strategic in the way we protect ourselves as a collective, ourselves as a community, ourselves as Rana and whomever stands with you, because what you have endured, and I came to know by reading, it's shocking. But this is anti-Palestinian racism. This is racism. And so I would like to read to you what anti-Palestinian racism is, because you will see how many of these instances happen, including in this institution. So anti-Palestinian racism is a form of anti-Arab racism, so you see the element of race and ethnicity is there, that silences, excludes, erases, stereotypes, defames, dehumanizes the Palestinians and their narrative. And it can take various forms: denying the Nakba, justifying violence against the Palestinians, not recognizing Palestinian collective identity and the right of self-determination, which is inalienable and has been there and violated for 100 years, erasing the human rights and equal dignity and worth of the Palestinian, excluding and pressuring to exclude Palestinian perspective, welcome to KCL, and defaming Palestinians and their allies with smears of, accusing them to be terrorist and anti-Semitic. So you see, all these can be also litigated. There should be a realignment of the tools at our disposal, because it's not normal that this university allows young professionals to go around and terrorize students and scholars alike, and the university doesn't take a stand. It's not normal that a university calls the police against its own students. So as you normalize the gates at the beginning, at the front door, if you do not react to this, you are normalizing the violence that has already penetrated your university. And you are making the world a worse place for who will come after you.
Thank you, Francesca. I'm very glad that you brought up the issue of racism, which is obviously at the very heart of this system that maintains occupation, dispossession, apartheid, and now genocide. It's so obvious that it's blinding, yet racism is never discussed when we talk about Palestine. I spent 2 hours having a conversation with an unnamed colleague who's been teaching here for many, many years, is very well known, who teaches our students to be critical, to check their sources, and to always support their claims with evidence. I had a 2-hour conversation about Palestine, and his response was, I cannot see what this has to do with race. So there is a degree of investment in denial, which is very interesting and which is, I think, central. And that's something that we need to confront. Because if we remove the veil and we face the profound genocidal racism that is systemic in our societies when it comes to Palestinians and other non-white people, then, the beautiful narrative about the Enlightenment, emancipation, and so on, would need to be revised, and that's a price that most people are not willing to pay. But I take your earlier point that we should shift the focus back to Palestine and perhaps to international law. I wanted to ask you about the international legal system, because we are witnessing the most documented, incontrovertible genocide in history, the first to be live streamed. Israeli leaders have very clearly expressed their intention to commit genocide. IDF soldiers proudly film themselves killing, destroying, looting, torturing. Ordinary Israeli citizens are caught on camera jubilating when massacres are committed, which reminds one of lynchings in the US South that were considered a spectacle. So again, bringing race back into discussion. And we have been seeing things that we didn't know existed. Genocidal jokes, genocidal hip-hop, the sexualization of genocide, etc. There's work to be done for us scholars for generations to come. But what we have also seen is that the architects of this international legal order are actively undermining that same order in order to protect Israel and its genocidal project. So my question to you, Francesca, is, do you believe that international law has now been discredited? Do you think that we should see international law as a tool of Western hegemony, which will never be used to its full extent if the defenders are white and allies of the West? You're not a defender.
I'll take an issue with that, but one thing at a time. So first of all, I would like to comment on your colleague, on your unnamed colleague, which I bet is not in the room. But it takes really, it takes such a degree of blindness and historical, anthropological, social, and legal. I understand that not everyone is a lawyer, but still, legal illiteracy to say that Palestine has nothing to do with racism, because, hey, just to think the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination has been dealing with the Israel-Palestine for at least the last 30 years, and it has qualified as condemned Israel for practicing racial discrimination against the Palestinians, and the International Court of Justice has mentioned that Israel practices racial discrimination and apartheid in the occupied Palestinian territory, and this is just because this is what the International Court of Justice has been asked to look at, not the system from the river to the sea. But it's fully documented. There are probably over 1,000 pages that document why Israel practices apartheid, which is the quintessential institutionalization of racism. Because the racial domination, an institutionalization of racial domination with intent to maintain that domination while also committing inhumane acts is the quintessential, is quintessential to apartheid. Apartheid, of course, our mind goes to apartheid South Africa. But hey, South Africa has given the world the term apartheid as this, to describe that institutionalization of racial segregation that settler colonialism is. And Palestine is absolutely not different, because look, the fact that Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory are under military law, military orders, martial law, which is inadequate. It's not supposed to rule the life of civilians for 58 years. Military courts to try kids as young as 12. This is a monstrosity that has been tolerated and commented on, and my former colleagues at the UN were making recommendations to make the international criminal justice system better for kids, so they created another monstrosity which is called juvenile military justice system. You see the absurdity of it. And so this is what I'm saying. A system which applies military law, written by soldiers, applied by soldiers, reviewed in military courts by soldiers, to the occupied population, while the civilians of the occupying, the nationals of the occupying power are free to roam around and live and settle and steal property from the occupied people, and they are under civil law of the occupier. Not only this is apartheid, this is annexation, which is an act of aggression. You see the beauty of international law? And it goes and I go to the question that you asked me. Look, again, I'm not starry-eyed about international law, but you see, international law is the system of rules that regulates the relations between states and international organizations. So it has the same value among states that domestic law has as a source of regulation in the relationship between states and citizens or state entities. So if we keep on saying, oh, international law doesn't apply, we just open ourselves for lawlessness at the international level. So a system in which might makes right. So I'm not starry-eyed about international law, but still, this is international law is a system of rules, and also the setup for mechanisms aimed to regulate our collective life through rules that our states decide to abide by. Has it been discredited? Yes, of course, because international law is to be, the effectiveness of the international law is premised upon two elements: the objectivity, the universality of the law, and also the capacity to be applied, to be enforced, and this is what is lacking. So yes, of course, there are limits in international law, but why so? And is it a tool for Western hegemony? Certainly it was, as it was conceived. But guys, I mean, find another discipline or another a field of studies that doesn't resent 500 years of colonialism. So it's great to have legal scholars who have opened up to criticism and self-introspection and call the doctors and the architects and all the other studies, because there is no discipline is innocent when it comes to scrutinize history, the way history is written. So, of course, there is a colonial legacy, but this is our origin. I mean, this is 500 years of our history. It's great that now we recognize it. It's great that finally settler colonialism can be identified, spotted on, and possibly redressed. What I see today is that no. International law is not, can be a hegemonic tool, but not of the West, of those who use it. So it could also be a tool in our hands if we used it properly. And this is where I see the opportunities and the potential, because international law regulates a number of areas where we can have an immediate impact. And it wouldn't be fair to see as a Western tool, doing that would equate to not recognizing all what has changed in international law, thanks to mention too, the former colonized people who have made of self-determination that before existed only for a few people, like Europe and its offsprings, those settler colonial countries which were birthed as liberal democracies from genocide, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, was beaten up seriously, so it couldn't proceed I couldn't go as far as Australia. But in a sense, there have been genocides all over 500 years of colonialism, from Latin America to Africa, and this is who we are, and being aware of it is a way to make the system better, to make the world a better place. And the other element is that international law has also been shaped by what we call today civil society, what we call today you and I. I mean, people who really struggle for a common system of values and humanity. And we wouldn't have, we can argue that the slave trade ended because it was no longer profitable, and it's true, but the sensitivity around it was also triggered by a civil society movement that stood against slave trade. I keep on giving the example that until the last century, we had people of color in zoos in Europe, okay? So we can argue that now the present moment is dark, but it's dark because we come from darkness, and human rights have helped improve and progress and make us a little bit better. Now this is the opportunity. This time Palestine is somewhat a test, and it's given us the opportunity not to see genocides becoming a script, because what has happened in Lebanon is what I had predicted, and this is not to make it about me, trust me, but 1 year ago, when I denounced that, I wrote a report called Anatomy of a Genocide, which was just an X-ray of what Israel had done in the first 5 months of violent, brutal, intentionally destructive assault against the people in Gaza. And it was not just about uprooting the resistance, it was about uprooting existence in it. This is what has been done to this part of Palestine that is called Gaza. And back then I said, Israel is not, watch out guys, because Israel is not denying to be destroying and to be killing. It's justifying the destruction out of a military necessity that is not proven. It's calling those who die either human shields or collateral damage. Is justifying its actions, is disproportionately destructive action as supported by military necessity, but by crushing the basic tenets of international humanitarian law, which are military necessity, the principle of precaution, of proportionality. So I was saying Israel is completely capsizing international humanitarian law, which is not the most protective instruments we have, but it's still to protect individuals from the scourge of war. So when there are conflicts and when life is not absolutely protected. And six months later, Israel has imposed the same script on the people of Lebanon by telling everyone on, broadcasted internationally, saying, we are telling the people of Lebanon that they have missiles under their beds. Incredible how the Israeli prime minister knows what the Lebanese have under their beds. Or the pager attack. I mean, I come from a country where newspapers have commended the astuce of the Israelis for devising this instrument of terror. And this is the racism we have. The racism we have is not different from the racism that we had as Western society 100 years ago. Because again, now we want to say, no, the Holocaust of the Jews and the Roma and Sinti and the disabled people happened in the dark. Not at all. Not at all. It happened our eyes. Because before being secluded in concentration camps, the Jews were killed in our cities, in ghettos. And they were not just killed with bullets, they were starved. They were killed through disease, through deprivation. And the reason why it was possible to do that is because the Jews had been discriminated against and persecuted for centuries. And they humanized to the point that you could treat them as less than animals and go away with it. How far have we gone from that? Not much. If today we can have the genocide of another people, the genocide of the Palestinians happening under our eyes, and many of us, most of that we can do is saying something that is not particularly intelligent on social media. This is where we are. This is why I say Palestine is a test for humanity. We cannot sit idle in the face of the uprooting of an entire people. This is still a settler colonial genocide, and it's not me saying that, it's the Israelis are calling, and it's not Trump, it's not President Trump, it's that the Israelis have said it, they will uproot the Palestinians because there is this inherent demographic nightmare that the Palestinians represent for Israel. And this is yet the third instance in history where I was saying it's not me. And this is the third time in history where Israel has the opportunity to get rid of the Palestinians as the non-Jews between the river and the sea. The first time was 1947-49, where Palestine was dismembered, and 750,000 Palestinians were kicked out of the land, while everything they left behind, almost everything, was destroyed so that they couldn't return. And the same thing happened in 1967. 350 of them were kicked out of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. And all what they had left behind was erased so that they could not return. And this is happening today. The reason why it has not happened already is because of two things. Because of the Palestinians themselves, who have seen that this is the last limb of Palestine that remains. I don't know how long they could last without our much more robust support. But it's them and it's us. I know that you might feel powerless and useless, but I can tell you from afar that the protest, that the global solidarity movement that has been rising is something historical, has rattled the cage. And this is why the system is turning so venomous, so horrific toward each of you. And it's showing the nerve and it's showing the muscles, because the fact is that they've tried to silence everyone and they've tried to ridicule everyone and they've tried to intimidate everyone. And the more you resist and you do that collegially, the more the system retracts. So we have no alternative by continuing to go forward.
Thank you, Francesca. What really struck me was your phrase that Palestine is a test, that Palestine is a test for international law. But there is another arena where this racial violence plays out and where its existence is denied, and that's universities. Universities, including this one. So I'm not going to repeat the whole list of King's failures. I think they were mentioned earlier. As we all know, we have millions invested in and partnerships with, and we collaborated with companies involved in the development of the technologies of apartheid and occupation and warfare and surveillance. We receive funding from donors backing Israeli illegal settlements and involved in the suppression of Palestinian solidarity. On this campus, the university has investigated pro-Palestine students, suspended some of them, and yes, it has called the police on them. All the while, it has allowed Zionist students to violate our regulations, threaten our academic freedoms, including ours to teach Palestinian history with Rana, to launch smear campaigns against vulnerable members of staff and students, organize protests with well-known extremist and violent groups to threaten us on our campus, and even issue death threats, and get away with all of that because of King's College London's inaction. So, as a scholar of race, I have no problem saying that King's College London is institutionally racist. It is not a safe place. It needed to be said. It is not a safe place for pro-Palestine students of all ethnicities, including Jewish, however, particularly those of Muslim and non-white backgrounds. So my last question to Francesca is, what would you tell our senior management if they were present tonight? As an international lawyer and as a representative of the United Nations, what do you think of their principle of neutrality?
Is it serious? I mean, is it serious?
Yes.
You have a principle of neutrality.
It's called value-based neutrality, to be precise.
Okay. All right. So neutrality is a principle that doesn't apply to universities unless you are actively providing food or essential supplies in a conflict area. So where you are supposed to keep your mouth sealed shut because you have a humanitarian duty to honor and serve, and you are caught in a conflict situation, so you are compelled not to take side because you can harm. And the first protection principle in a humanitarian context is do no harm. So this is where neutrality also comes from, although then it has evolved as a separate system. This is not unique in the sense I've seen other people outside the humanitarian context using the question of neutrality as an index to hide, as a finger behind which to hide themselves. And it's so sad, no, to have intellectuals doing that, because then they turn neutrality into, a pompous word for indifference or an elegant word for ignorance. Whatever it is that affects the management of any university, I don't want to be very harsh on this. I want to receive more information about that. Just because, parenthesis, I'm writing a report about the private sector complicity in the various illegalities that take place in the occupied Palestinian territory, and universities will be looked at. So, there is a lot of anti-Palestinian racism there, but there is also potential complicity in unlawful endeavors. So again, why not to take this matter seriously? And so instead of saying what I think of the cuff of the management, let me look better into this and come up with a.
If I may.
I'm not done yet. But again, before talking about the management, which doesn't surprise me, because I've received reports from students who, out of their own time, their own precarious situations, because you have exams to pass, etc. They have investigated and reported on the problematic ties that their universities have, and I've received also the report that you have compiled. I cannot tell you how amazed you are at this kind of work, at this kind of report, because this is such an act of principled citizenship. You really, I'm not saying that in a rhetorical way or to make you feel better, but when I say international law, of course, it binds a state, and it's about state regulation. But the aftermath of the Second World War is where we, the people, were seen as people. And it's we, the people, that the UN Charter talks about eventually, is to talk that it talks about, that it talks to. So we need to see this action that students are engaging with as an act of responsible citizenship, to hold institutions accountable. Now, one thing I have is that the facts I've heard tonight, I knew something about it before coming because it was in the news and some independent media reported about that. But most of it is really something that should be investigated, not just by me, by others. But again, I often say justice on something for Palestine starts at home, at each country level. And so policymakers need to be held accountable as individuals, whether they have authorized conducts that might amount to international crimes. And this is not just politicians, it's the head of corporations. There is not a way to hold corporations accountable before the International Criminal Court. But the head, the CEO of these companies, yes. And so this is why we need to make that extra effort. I'm trying to make that extra effort so that there is no stone unturned when it comes to, the private sector is made by a variety of entities, like the military industry, the security surveillance industry that lies sort on the cuspid between military and civilian, and then there is the corporations, the businesses, the banks, the supply chain, and the charities, and the universities and research institute. So what strikes me is that the candor and the nonchalance that institutions have, saying, "Oh, but we are doing nothing. We're just cooperating with a state that is committing international crimes, that has two leaders wanted for crimes against humanity and war crimes by the International Criminal Court, which already 1 year and 2 months ago, the International Court of Justice recognized as being committing plausibly acts of genocide. Few months later, the International Court of Justice reminded, in the case Nicaragua versus Israel, that member states had an obligation not to transfer weapons directly or indirectly, in total or in parts, so components, so F-35, to a country to a state that might be committing not just genocide, grave violations of the international humanitarian law, meaning war crimes. And it's clear that war crimes have been committed. So can we take, because member states do not seem, not all of them, member states, particularly in the West, do not seem to take international law seriously. Can we take this challenge? Can we rise up to this challenge and make the system accountable? Because this can be the shift. This can turn this into the last genocide in human history. But anyone, including universities, that have made themselves complicit with crimes, and again, we don't need to go and look at Palestine, the anti-Palestinian racism that speaks through what you have been describing and what I've heard even before coming here, it's shocking. So I don't know where the other scholars are, and I suspect that those of my age and beyond in the room are not your grandparents, so I suppose there are some professors, some academics in the room as well. And so the students cannot be left on their own in this one. They're the most fragile part of the community. It's your responsibility as well. It's your society, it's your country, and especially the British people. As I feel obliged to do what I do as an Italian, because my ancestors partook, doesn't matter in which measure, but still partook in the genocide of the Jews and the Roma and Sinti because they were the other in our community. This is my sense of responsibility today. And so it should be your sense of responsibility because of what Great Britain has done to Palestine through its almost 30 years of colonialism that have led to the dismemberment of Palestine. You should really act to correct the wrong of the past. And this is a way to live a more dignified present. This will be such a way to turn the page and start a more dignified also engagement with member states from the global south, which are rising. What they've done, I mean, Namibia, Angola, South Africa, or Chile, Brazil, I mean, this makes us look like really, as Europeans, as the idiots, the useful idiots in the General Assembly. It should have been us taking Israel before the International Court of Justice. It should have been us to activate investigation and criminal proceedings. Instead, no, we keep on receiving them, their leaders, rolling the red carpet, while others who defend human rights receive death threats with not even a word of apology from the government. This is your country today, and you should be worried a little bit about it.
When I unsuccessfully tried to interrupt you, Francesca, it was obviously to agree with you.
Oh, did you try?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. I'm a lost cause.
It was just to say that if you need a list of failures that is strongly supported, our students from KCL Stands for Justice have compiled a report that reads like a report produced by an international organization. It is amazingly detailed and supported, and our students have been compiling it without being paid, obviously, while paying money to the institution, while studying, while working, and while being treated the way they've been treated, and for some of them, while dealing with their traumas. So anyone who hasn't read it, I really recommend that you go on the website of KCL Stands for Justice and download it. It's a sobering read. And a round of applause for those who worked on it.
I have a proposal on that. Sorry,
No, it's fine, don't worry. Do you have something to say to our senior management, or should we move to...
prefer putting things in writing.
In writing,
We are very
very good,
serious.
excellent. So we've gone a little bit over time, but I'm very, very mindful to make sure that everyone gets a chance to ask Francesca questions. I think we have one microphone. It is working. So we will take 3 questions at a time. So, okay, there we go. 1, 2, and 3. There you go.
Hello, my name is Max Mamarklu. I'm a master's student studying politics and economics in the Middle East here. I'm also American and Turkish, but the American side is a little more contested, let's say. And thank you so much for being here and joining us tonight. How do we pressure states, particularly I'm thinking of the United States, who have decided sort of to take a step back from international law, say by not signing on to the ICJ and ICC and following some of these international regulations and sort of deciding to maybe be enforcers in certain instances and totally check out in other instances? How do we even start by pressuring our governments into doing these things? I mean, I've been active in these protests, but these protests seem issue-focused rather than maybe the history of the United States, which obviously has not been one to play or abide by the international laws they seem to preach.
There's a gentleman here, 3rd row.
Thank you. Hi, Francesca. Richard Wilde, University of Greenwich. I'm a criminologist by day and a union activist the rest of the time. Do universities... Thank you. Do universities have an implied responsibility to prevent genocide? Can we as students, I'm not a student, but paying fees, and us as staff, employees paying taxes, challenge universities, and if so, how, and what would be the legal basis for doing so?
The young man over there.
Hello, my question is, since the crackdown on pro-Palestinian students in America has started, do you think it could spread to Europe or different countries and put European or people who study in Europe into danger? Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the beginning of your...
My question is, since the crackdown on pro-Palestinian students has started in the US, could this kind of mindset spread to Europe and put students into danger? Yeah.
Thank you. Francesca, in whatever order.
Yeah, I will start with the last one. I wish we are still at the point where this question would be applicable, because the crackdown has already started. And it has started really from the west to the east of Europe, and the north and the south. I don't think that, probably with the exception of Spain and Ireland, I don't think that have been countries where protesters have not been pushed back. I've not experienced a crackdown that has gone from withdrawal of authorization to protest on campus grounds to assault by the police and the violent dismantlement of the encampment, profiling of the students, and on occasions criminal charges pressed and suspension from the university. It is, again, this is surreal. This is surreal. When I was at university, this would have not been possible. So there has been already a shrinking of the space for exercising fundamental rights and freedoms in our European system. And again, I think that the turning point has been the 9/11. And we have not seen the rise of the rise of Islamophobia, the rise of racism that after the 9/11 has been reported. We have not discussed it enough as a phenomenon that was threatening the system from the beginning, but this is the result of it. And the fact that individuals have been dealt with as a security threat, again, it's a reflex. I used to call it years ago the Israelization, Palestinization of the world, And it sounded like an exaggeration, but now it makes total sense, because I do see the way police reacts, or the fact that sometimes, again, I've been in alternative venues for events that had been cancelled in university in Germany. Not only there was the police in full riot gear to to police the surroundings. There were police officers in riot gears inside the conference room intervening and telling the moderator and 3 academics sitting next to the 2 academics, a doctor and a civil servant, not to use those terms because they were not necessary. Do you understand what it is? The police coming to tell us what we can and cannot say? And I said, I mean, what people ask me, how do you feel about that? I feel sorry for the German people, because they are already experiencing fascism and they seem to be content with it. And because I know, as an Italian, I know where it's going, I'm scared for my people as well, and for you. So, again, fascism somewhere is a threat everywhere. And so this is why we should wake up before it's too late. We still, in the UK, you still have room for maneuvering, still room for protection. So the crackdown on students has been already an alarm that should have awakened many. Again, I do see that in this place, civil society is responsive. You have a responsible civil society. It's the institutional, it's the establishment that is resisting. And this is why strategic action needs to be pursued. And there are ways, and goes to the second question that was asked, how we can challenge the universities. There are different ways, and I might not have right now all the answers, but there are 2 things that come to mind. And on something that is very context specific, you might need to consult with lawyers. I know that it's a scary road, because it entails fees, but this is where the community and the solidarity will surprise you. Because in the past few years alone, a system to defend the defender has emerged, and there is the European Legal Support Center and other centers that provide pro bono services this is a way the lawyers have to redeem themselves, sometimes. Yeah, the criminologists
Someone
can help
takes
you.
notes, please.
Sorry?
Someone take notes of the institution that you just named so we can get in touch with them.
And I can, you have me once, you have me forever. So just to say, we will continue. But so this is one. But there is also part of the credibility of an institution goes with the reputation. And the reputational damage that the management is doing to the institution is quite significant. Why would you stay silent about that? Why not to expose it? Why not to make an issue of it? So you need to bring things that happen inside here outside. And I'm sorry for my team, which will be pestered by this new meme of mine for the next few months. But today, as I was in a meeting, I kept on saying we need to move from the posture of breaking the silence. We have broken the silence. We are talking about apartheid and Israel as a settler colonial state, and Israel as committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, and today, no question, genocide. This would have been not possible years ago. But because at the cultural level, this was unacceptable. So we have been working on breaking the silence. Now we need to break the silos, because we work in silos. We don't think as a community. We still, it's difficult to unite across colleges, across departments. Seriously. I've been to places where students are saying, well, it's been difficult to organize a protest because people from the other campus, and I was saying, where is the other campus? across the street. You see, this is what privilege is. And think of the Palestinians on a small piece of land, besieged, segregated, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of segregated roads, and these poor kids wake up in the morning in Masafer Yatta and to go to their school, which would be probably 1 kilometer, there is no buses because it's a military zone that Israel has declared closed, and they have to go around settlements and encampments, and it takes hours. So if they can take the effort, can't you organize across the spectrum, like really bringing together people you wouldn't think of, like the trade unions and the singers and the artists and the doctors who have been on the disgruntled civil servants. Guys, either we unite or we will be brushed away, I don't know how to say, but this is either we stand united and we make a difference, otherwise we will be continue to be really pushed off the table like if we were crumbles. And the last question is how you as an American can pressure the state on the stand it's taking. Is very regrettable, to say the least, the stance it's taking on the ICJ and the ICC. I mean, the US has passed measures to basically, prohibit engagement with the International Criminal Court. There are sanctions on the staff of the International Criminal Court. There has been a full-on assault on the International Criminal Court. But not only that, again, I think that this is where member states have more leverage than you as an individual, which doesn't mean, I don't mean to say do not engage on that. Of course, you should be part of a civil society that keeps on putting international law at the center of the discussion. But it's very difficult in the US because the US for 80 years has behaved as if international law was just good for public consumption, for speaking. Because, look, when I realized this year that when I was saying Israel has been a serial violator of international law since the beginning of its existence, and someone is saying, the US as well. And yeah, we have to be honest. The US has been above the law for a long time. But where you may really be effective in play a difference is the fact that this administration in particular has embarked on a full-on assault not just against international law and the human rights system at the international level, at the domestic level. So there is so much that is being threatened. And for me, one of the most scary moments in the life of this young administration is when I saw the president of the United States announcing the cutting of access to sports for transgender children. How many children are we talking about? 1,000? These are the numbers I've heard. And he was announcing that in front of a crowd of cheering mothers and children. And this is, for me, the worst picture of this administration. So it has not even to do with Palestine. Because to be honest, it's not that the administration which preceded this has been any better. The genocide has been enabled financially, economically, militarily, and politically by the Biden administration. And this has been, yes, a series of tragedy foretold thanks to the incredibly shocking support of the United States. So, but it's where I see the real risk is the erosion of fundamental freedoms for all of you as Americans. And this is where I think that making the link and acting against this aberration, it becomes a moral imperative for all citizens.
Okay, I think we can take 3 more questions. Okay, so the young lady here, the 2 young ladies in the second row, and then we'll see, but...
I want to see you saying not the young lady, when if it was,
Sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Hi, bueno, grazie mille. for being here. I'm a student here at King's. I study law, and I also am part of the S4J. And I was wondering, I'm also interested in international law, and in face of Israel committing so clear breaches of international law, just cogent norms that prohibition of genocide, self-determination, the right to life, and other states that have obligations not to allow this, not doing anything in front of this, what's more, helping Israel do this. And as you have reported in the last report, and you have mentioned now, also Israel using international law, international humanitarian law to justify the genocide that is happening, describing the occupation as war and the genocide as collateral damage. In face of all of this, you have said that we have to advocate, that you are an advocate of international law. And I also want to hope that international law can give an answer to this. But I was wondering how, if you think it's possible to enforce the law as we have now, and if so, how this could be done.
Hi. So I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and even though my country is pro-Palestine, we haven't seen enough action. So fighting against Israel's genocide. A lot of the people in Saudi are upset by the lack of action, but we can't protest. So my question is, how do the people of Saudi Arabia, or of countries like it, use ourselves as tools to fight in a country that silences individual voice and criminalizes dissenting opinions?
Hi, my name's Amal, and I'm a neuroscience psychology student, and I'm also part of S4J. I guess my question is, well, I've seen your reports that covered the severe, lasting, psychological trauma experienced by Palestinians. However, international legal frameworks often prioritize physical violence rather than psychological warfare, which remains like an unprosecuted tool of oppression. Do you believe international law adequately addresses psychological harm as a form of systemic violence? And how can legal mechanisms evolve to hold perpetrators accountable for the long-term psychological devastation inflicted on any oppressed population? Thank you.
Thank you, all three. Francesca?
Yes, I hope I understood the last question. I'm sorry, you speak super fast. Do you mind to repeat the question? Otherwise, I will say something that is not what you asked and it doesn't make sense.
So I said your reports have covered the severe, lasting psychological trauma experienced by Palestinians. And however, the international legal frameworks often prioritize physical violence rather than psychological warfare that remains an unprosecuted tool of oppression. Do you believe that international law adequately addresses any psychological harm as a form of systemic violence? And how can any legal mechanisms evolve to hold perpetrators accountable for the long-term psychological devastation inflicted on any oppressed individual?
Yeah,
bit of a big question.
Probably was better before when I didn't understand the question. Now that I have to answer it, it's going to be tough. Thank you. Okay. Look, I will try to keep this answer brief because I think that I've already somewhat given elements about that. Well, international law is a tool, and is a means to an end, not an end in itself. If there were other tools that I thought as potentially effective, tools that I could handle, because of course there is the arguments, oh, there is politics, but for me, politics doesn't exist as separate from the realm of international law. For me, politics, in a word, maybe it's quite idealistic and naive, but what are we without ideals and dreams? So I do see the world, the society I want to live in. It's okay. the society I want to live in is one which is regulated by the certainty of the law, and where the power, so the exercise of power, the shaping of politics, which, by the way, it's not politics is not a dirty word. It's something that belongs to us, and is shaped by the law, which is not an immutable tool. Law is written, but also there is a law as it's written, but the way it's written changes throughout history, changes through culture. It can be changed, maybe because the law can be changed when it doesn't serve the purpose that the society is requiring, but most of it is the interpretation. So I do expect politics to respect the law, and so international relations not to act against international law, not to cherry pick international law, not to refer to international law in statements, but following it as a matter of coherence and consistency, because continuous violation is going to weaken the system and bring us to square zero. But of course, there are other instruments. Again, today in another meeting, someone was saying, follow the money. And so there is the question of investments and the private sector that is critical, is where every individual has the capacity to contribute, not to make the system for the Palestinians worse than it is, and in a very modest way. It's about knowing what to buy and what not to buy. And this is something that civil society has taken up as a global issue during the resistance to apartheid South Africa. And there is a movement which is Palestine-led, and is the boycott, divestment and sanction movement, which speaks to the individuals, but it speaks about various realities, but it's there. It provides tools to those who just from home, knowing what they can buy and what they shouldn't buy, can contribute not to make the Palestinians continue to pay the price for this global injustice. And another point is, Israel is. There are many states in the General Assembly. I don't think that there is one state that doesn't violate human rights in some ways or to an extent. However, I think that Israel has a peculiarity that no other member state has, that make it what it, in my view, is fitting the profile of of a serial violator of international law. And this is not to say that other states do not do that. But Israel this year, in the past 16 months, has assaulted the United Nations like no other states by destroying the 70% or destroying or damaging, rendering not functioning 70% of the UN premises in the Gaza Strip, killing over 250 UN staff members. 250, because it was so indiscriminate that no one was spared, in fact, by shooting at peacekeepers in Lebanon, defaming and declaring persona non grata so many people, from me as a Special Rapporteur to the Secretary General of the United Nations, outlawing and banning United Nations agency from working in the occupied Palestinian territory, and including Israel. UNRWA is not the first. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights was kicked out of the occupied Palestinian territory years ago in retaliation against the United Nations and its office, the OHCHR in particular, for handling the database on business investing in settlements. So, and this is why I was telling the United Nations as I became a Special Rapporteur, why do you keep it silent? Because this is the best way. You know, I come from a land which is plagued, which has been plagued for decades by the mafia. And I know that the best way for the mafia system to win is through silencing people and scaring people. The moment the people unite and speak out, yeah, they put themselves in the line, but they cannot kill us all. They cannot fire us all. They cannot silence us all. And our strength is in the togetherness and in trying to speak as much as we can on a few issues with one voice, with unison. And what are we talking about? Ending genocide, ending occupation, ending apartheid? Is it that much to ask? And so the question of Saudi Arabia, it leads me to talk about the countries where it's not possible to exercise fundamental freedoms, where there is a clear retaliation and crackdown on protesters. And this is not only the case of Saudi Arabia or most of the countries I can think of in the Arab region, which is a region I'm really attached to because I spent so many years in various countries from Morocco, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine itself, and now Tunisia. But this is why I say there is a lot that can be done in a country like Saudi Arabia by people with power, by people with influence. And there are very privileged people in Saudi Arabia, like other places in the globe, in the Gulf countries. Not all Gulf countries are aligned with what Israel is doing. Not all Arab countries are aligned, in fact. It's a matter of force, and also the Arab region has been hit so powerfully by the shock doctrine I was thinking of. 30 years ago, the Middle East was a different place. Look at today Syria, Iraq, or Libya. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. But again, the Arab region is much weaker than it used to be. And still there is a potential. And the potential I see in the Gulf countries is that I hear what they say, and they don't want to be considered as the ATM of the world anymore. They want to look at Qatar. Look, Qatar is now, we can debate on whether it's using its international stance effectively enough, but Qatar cannot be ignored anymore. And I think that the Gulf countries in particular have the opportunity to rise, to the challenge and portray themselves as different. There is an entire revolution, an entire global south that is sticking the head out of the parapet. And there is the young generation from everywhere which is looking for leaders. Where are the political leaders? I can't believe that there are not. And in fact, there are. In the global south, there are. So I do hope that this is a moment of reckoning for Arab region, for the states in the Arab region, to do things differently, because they need to be done. There are things that need to be done differently. And the answer to your question, can international law be used as a remedy to the psychological violence that is done? This is the question, right? Partially, yes. It's I don't think so, unless we understand that international law is a tool to fight racism. Because in a way, the mother or the father of all evils is racism. And it's, again, there is this fantastic Israeli historian whom I really admire, and I feel proud to call a friend right now, which is Reza Zia-Ebrahimi, is the first person to denounce what Israel was doing, outside of the Palestinian circle, of course. The first one to denounce what Israel was doing as genocide, and he called it as a textbook case of genocide a few days after October 8 or 9, where the further siege over the siege of Gaza and the cutting of aid or the cutting of food, electricity, water, and medicines was announced. And he said, this is a textbook case of genocide. And he didn't say that just because of the genocidal incitement of what Israeli leaders said, but because as an historian, he knows that genocide is a process, is not an act. And it happens through the dehumanization of the other, when the dehumanization of the other is so normalized as today. You saw, I mean, do you remember a few years ago, up to 5-10 years ago, you would have Israel's excesses killing Palestinians, children and adults alike, or home demolitions, and you would have Western leaders criticizing here and there. Is it what international is for? Criticizing without acting? What about the obligation not to aid and assist a state that is committing international wrongful act? What about the obligation not to recognize legal consequence to an illegal situation? What about the erga omnes, meaning the obligation that is upon everyone to realize the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people? Not many Western states have taken international law as seriously as they were ordering other states to do. So yes, there is an element of violence that has traveled across the multilateral system, and this is the opportunity for us to see that. This genocide was totally preventable before October 7, because the acts, and this is what Ras Segal was trying to tell me in February 2023, so months before October 7, he was saying, you are the Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, why don't you talk about genocide? And I'm sorry, it took a genocide for people like me to understand what a genocide is, and to understand that what is very intuitive for people from the global south, it's very complicated for people with racial bias, including myself, to understand. For me, genocide was something like Rwanda, or something, the horrors of Rwanda, or the horrors of Bosnia-Herzegovina and the Holocaust. And so this is wrong. This is really the worst way of honoring the memory of those who have died during genocides in the past, and to dishonoring. This is the best way to dishonor what the Genocide Convention is about, which has 3 obligations: to prevent genocide, to stop genocide, and then to punish. How can we prevent genocide if we don't see that? You know? So it's, yeah, there is no way for international law to be an effective tool to heal, a healing tool. We are the healing tool, but we need to see the evil out there in order to take measures against that. I see international law as a more effective tool for accountability. This, yes, and this is why I said people who have partaken in either crimes or alleged crimes or wrongful acts, contributed to make states partake in wrongful acts, they have to be held accountable, either through the judicial ways or through the naming shaming that civil society is very good at. So the usual toolbox of human rights defenders.
Thank you very much. I'm a very flexible guy, especially when it comes to timing. My students know, but we really have to stop here because we're taking Francesca out for a well-deserved dinner, and I think the restaurant's kitchen is going to close if we don't get going now. But another round of applause, please, for Francesca.
Thank you.
Palestine! Will be free. Palestine will be free. Palestine.
Palestine!